In fact, today when we are going to start the African diaspora, it's we're going to talk about this a little bit. Okay.
Sir, you are a host now.
I can see that. Thank you. Thank you, Firoz. So I already have it in my reading list. I will be reading it. Shrestha, if you want, I can share it with you in the mail.
Yes, sir, definitely.
Okay. So I'll share that borderless homeless book with you.
Yeah.
So then you can also parallelly read it with me, because I then get into too many things together, and somehow then when I was doing this North African diaspora, which we are going to talk about today, there were a lot of fascinating things which came about, in the course of it. And then I started reading on that. Then I realized that this also needs to be talked about. So it becomes, it becomes a hyper networked, knowledge thing that you go into. In fact, I think we can start. Should we start? Guys, can you hear my voice?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. In between, there is a probability that the PPT might just go because there was some problem in this laptop. I'm using a new laptop to do this. So in case it happens, just bear with me. I'll restart PPT. Okay, so let's start. We till last week were doing the Asian diaspora. This week onwards, we start with the African diaspora. We have the North African diaspora, the East African diaspora, and the West African diaspora, as per the units which have been shared with me, after which we will go on to the European diaspora. Now, with African diaspora, there's a very interesting thing which one needs to understand, that evolution of life as we know as of now, the modern human being started in Africa. So, in fact, when we start on the African diaspora, do we start with the movement that started 100,000 years ago within and outside of Africa? So, the diaspora studies, when we are looking at diaspora studies, in fact, when William Safran in the 90s brought out, how to categorize diaspora with 6 points, more often than not, he was replicating already the diaspora, scholars or the diasporic studies, which were taken with Jews as a focus. Hang on. The PPT stopped. Let me restart it. Why did it stop? I don't know. Okay. So more often than not, in fact, in one of the authors that I was reading, in the first decade of diasporic studies, among all the books that were written, 90% or 95% of the books that were written on diaspora were on the Jew diaspora. Whereas in the next decade, the number of books written on the Jewish diaspora became a minority, because other diasporas then started coming in. People started looking at the fact that there are all kinds of diaspora. In fact, today itself, I was reading this research done by this scholar, a postdoc scholar, on the migrant population in Bihar, where the males migrate, and she has done her research in Araria district in Bihar, and how the male migration for jobs leads to political empowerment for the women, the feminization of politics. And today,
Sir, did you say Araria?
Sorry?
Did you say Araria town in Bihar or a village?
That's right, Araria district.
Actually, there is a very famous short story by Mahashweta Devi, and that's also based on that. But I don't know if it's a fictional name. perhaps what she's using in that story, but it's the same.
Okay,
Yeah.
possibly. Then I'll look that up. But Mahashweta Devi picked up a lot of her characters from the ground. She's a subaltern scholar, a writer, a subaltern scholar, and she picked up the voices of the voiceless.
So I think it's the same, perhaps then.
Possible,
Maybe.
possible.
Possibly.
But this particular research which this girl did, Ratnagiri or Ratna something, was how political empowerment of the women are happening because of this male migration. And today, diaspora studies also talking about technical diasporas when technical professionals are moving to various places across the world for jobs. So the whole diasporic study from those 6 points which William Safran started have expanded. So does the start of the modern human being out of Africa constitute diaspora? Some scholars argue that this early exodus is such a differentiation of character that it does not seem as a step of the diasporic process. So this was one of the first start of people moving out of Africa. The second process of was the merchants, traders, slaves. In fact, long before Christopher Columbus started his journey, different sizes population of African origin in India, Portugal, Spain, Italy were there everywhere, because origin of modern human beings started in Africa. In fact, slaves, the Atlantic trade in slaves, there were about 11 to 12 million slaves who were taken out of Africa and moved into Americas. So wouldn't these slaves also have a memory of their homeland? Would this be also an African diaspora? In fact, in the North Africa, when we go to look at North Africa, in some scholars look North Africa use Mauritania and Western Sahara also as a part of North Africa, but some people do not. In fact, Mauritania was also a place which was the transit point for the Atlantic slave trade. So there were so many Africans which moved out, but this also comes as a part of the African diasporic studies. And then, of course, so let's look at the North African part, the North African diaspora, and the current engagement. And let's look at countries such as Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, Sudan, and Tunisia constitute North Africa. And because part of it is Arab, for example, Sudan is not Arab. Algeria, Egypt, Libya is typically Arab. So there is this differentiation between Arab, non-Arab. Then there is a differentiation between white and black. I was reading another article, and this particular North Africa, the western part of North Africa is called the Maghreb. Maghreb in Arabic means the West. So there were labor migration strategies which are implemented in multiple countries in early 50s, played a large role in individual countries' socio-economic development. There has been a change of migration policy. So I was reading how racism has started in Maghreb. Now think about it. Africa is such a huge continent, and Africa has gone through so much tumult, and now the North Africas, there is racism between people migrating from south into north. So we also have looked at the fact, as I kept telling you in earlier units, there is this constant fight between nationalism, between globalism, and again, as the world is getting closer, there are all these pulls and pressures which are coming in. The identity politics is playing out, and there are so many other things which is coming about. So this is what North Africa is. Oh, hang on. Let me restart it again. Just a sec.
So you can do one more thing.
Tell me.
If you can share your PPT on mail with someone, one of us, and then maybe
Okay.
one of us can play it like on our laptop, or I can play it maybe.
I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah.
Then I will have to do the host to you. I don't know whether I can transfer the host to you.
Okay. I don't know about that.
So
I
because I will have to create a host. Hang on, hang on, hang on, hang on. Let me just do it. We will have a little disruption. Okay, hang on. Let me see if I can make you the host. Participant. Shrestha. Okay, Shrestha, I'm making you the co-host. I'm forwarding you the PPT. Give me a sec. Okay, Shrestha, have you got the PPT?
So I'm just checking.
Shrestha,
So I haven't got it. I don't know why. I'm refreshing again.
hang on, hang on. Yeah, it's gone to Shrestha Chopra, Shrestha 997. Haven't received it? Hang on. While you are checking out, let me start it. Otherwise, we keep sitting out here. Okay, so this is the North African part of the continent as we know it. Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, and Sudan. Also remember, right here is the Mediterranean Ocean. We will see in a different map. So three major geographical features: the Sahara Desert in the south, the Atlas Mountains in the west, and Nile in the east. And if you notice, here is the physical map. So here are the Atlas Mountains. This is the Sahara Desert, and here is the Nile. This constitutes the North Africa. The Atlas Mountains occupies most of northern Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. Egypt is the Nile, and the rest of the part is the desert. All this area is the desert. In fact, the highest peak of high Atlas regions are snow-capped. So this is the physical map. So African cultural theorist George Alexander Shepard was of the opinion that the term African diaspora did not emerge in the Anglophone world until the 50s. Of course, African diaspora already existed long before that. The very fact of taking African slaves to America and Europe already was the start of an African diaspora, because inevitably this slave trading was, not voluntary. So that is the reason why this diaspora was already there. North Africa has become one of the world's leading labor frontiers because it spans between EU on one side and the GCC on another side. In fact, if you see the map, this is your North Africa, here is your EU, the complete EU, and here is the GCC. So obviously with the development of Europe and GCC, here is where the labor movement will happen. And inevitably from here, people will be coming here and moving. In fact, I have a slide which shows how the migrant movement is happening. The Arabic term for west of North Africa is called Maghreb, while the eastern part is called Mashriq, the eastern part of the Arab world, encompassing much of the northern part of Africa, including a large part of Sahara Desert, but excludes Egypt and Sudan. So Egypt and Sudan comes in Mashriq, which is the eastern part. The traditional definition of Maghreb, which restricted its scope to the Atlas Mountain and the coastal plains of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya, was expanded in modern times to include Mauritania and the disputed territory of Western Sahara. So let me just show you. Here is Mauritania, here is Western Sahara. Western Sahara was under the Spanish occupation till 75. In fact, this Western Sahara was a bone of contention between Mauritania and Morocco. So much so that after the Spanish withdrew, there was a war between these two countries till such time Mauritania left its claim on Western Sahara. So today, a large part of it is occupied by Morocco. So that is where I was talking about history, as to how things happened today were based on a lot of factors in history, how things unfolded. Between 1830 and 1962, European colonization of North Africa with settlement in Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and Libya. So mostly...
So your voice is not audible.
Is it audible now? Hello? Is it audible now?
Yes, sir, it's audible, sir.
Maybe others can tell. I said so. I think I think perhaps my network.
It's quite possible our networks keep on varying in terms of bandwidth. So if you have any problem hearing my voice, put it on the chat so that I know there is a problem, because my network shows okay. Okay, we can hear. Okay, Kangat is saying he can hear. So Shesha, there might be a problem with your network. So Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco was largely French colonies. Libya was Italian, I think. Libya was Italian. Egypt was British. So colonization had a huge part across the world. In fact, diaspora formation, when colonization happened, a lot of people were moved out of their homelands, either forcefully or otherwise, in terms of going to a host land. Majority of the European citizens left after independence in these countries in the 50s and 60s. Existing social and economic ties had created waves of future. So in fact, the current French riots which happened was again because of these people from North Africa, especially Algeria, who are out there, and there is this tensions which are rising in Europe because of all these migrants. Hang on, where are we? Okay. Cheers. Okay. So between 50s and 60s, these particular ties continued in terms of people migrating. Over 60s and 70s, emigration to France, but also Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium boomed as a result of construction which was happening in Europe. And if you remember, in one of the earlier units, we had talked about how Turkey entered into contracts with various European countries to send labor. Similarly, there was something called guest workers migrated of that period, the North African diaspora, the foundation for subsequent family and student migration. So all these people then migrated to North Europe, which was being rebuilt after World War II. From 70 to 90, while Algerian immigration decreased after the government enacted an immigration stop in place till 85, whereas Morocco and Tunisia remained high, particularly to Spain and Italy. And there were also inter-regional migration. Tunisians migrated to Libya and Moroccans to North America due to stricter. And then as things changed in Europe, like for example, as the immigration to North Europe reduced, South Europe started needing more workforce and migrants started reaching South Europe. See, inevitably, one of the factors of migration is better economy. So whenever there is poverty, there is an economic consideration, people always emigrate for a better life. So if you see, I picked up this slide on how the migration from North Africa happens into Europe. So if you see, this is Morocco, this is Libya, and here is how it is going. The Eastern Mediterranean route is a major route, as well as the Western Balkan route. The rest of the routes are, and if you see, we have this constant news items of, this boat capsizing of migrants and people losing their lives because people are making this arduous journey across the Mediterranean to get a better life. And then I picked up this news item, migrant crisis, migration to Europe explained. In fact, I was, seeing this video of an interview with the Greek finance minister or something, who was lambasting the British migration policy. The argument was very interesting. The argument was that while the European countries colonized the world, now when the migrants of the independent South are coming into Europe, Europe wants to set up boundaries, which is not fair because Europeans went and colonized these countries. So if a reverse migration is happening to these European countries, what's wrong about it? That was the argument that was propounded, right? Let's not go into the right and wrong of it, but that's the way it is today. In fact, also there is among scholars, the Middle East and North Africa are often referred to by the acronym MENA, Middle East and North Africa. And it's a regional identifier. So if you Google, you will come across MENA, often used in academia, military planning, disaster relief, media planning, and business writing. They use the term MENA. So we have the Maghreb, which is the western part of North Africa. Then, of course, there is this North Africa, and Middle East and North Africa clubbed together is MENA. Region shares a number of cultural, economic, and environmental similarities across its comprising countries. They are as different, and yet they share. It's like Asia. Let's say South Asia shares a certain set of cultural, economic, and environment similarities, and yet there are so many differences. But the equation of identity is not straightforward, as Arabic speakers equivalent to Arabic people. There are still communities in Maghreb that speak Berber or Amzigh and a dialect called Darija with clear French and Spanish. So you see, identities are always split. Even for a common Arab, country, the Arab country itself is split into multiple identities. Being Arab also is no alternative or even black to being African. So there are black Arabs, there are white Arabs. And as I was reading this article, you can Google it, how racism is increasing in the Maghreb world. So one of the reasons they said was possibly these conversations have not been had historically. For example, a whole lot of conversation about religion, about identity, about nation. Look at India. We just didn't have these conversations at all. For example, LGBTQ, we are not having those conversations. And typically what happens is when conversations do not happen, there is something which does not which is not explicit, which does not come out explicitly, and then it explodes because those conversations were not had. For example, if India would have had religion conversations since independence, possibly today what we are seeing may not have happened, may not. Hang on, let me just restart it. Okay. Share. Okay. As it prepares. Okay. So being Arab is also no alternative or even black to African. So there are all these split identities, breakup identities which happen, which then, have various, effects on diasporas. So let's do a little case studies. Let's look at the Moroccan diaspora. 5 million Moroccans live abroad, with the majority of diaspora being located in Europe, especially France. So there is a Moroccan world news. And again, in the previous units, I've been talking about now with internet and social media being a major boon for home countries to connect with diasporas. In fact, diasporas are able to now have a continuity of connection with other diasporas across the world using internet. And now with peer-to-peer messaging, with with video chats, the connection becomes much easier. The Moroccan diaspora factor to consider in government policy making. There are more and more news items which are now talking about how the diaspora is going to influence home and host. So and diaspora has become a very important part of the outreach of any home country. Morocco has always been a center for migration. For centuries, it hosted different people crossed by migration flow, and it sent its own nationals abroad. France, 33%, Spain, 26%, and Italy, 16%. In Belgium, the Moroccan population is the largest percentage-wise, with 4% of the Belgian population being Moroccan. Only 6% live in other MENA countries. So it's not just that they are out there. They are among the MENA countries too. So as the Policy Center for New South puts it, Moroccan migrants ease the country's chronic employment problem. Now, this you will also see is a common thread even when we were studying the Asian diasporas. The diasporas almost kind of ease the country's chronic economic problem. Now, any policy maker can understand the fact that in case you are able to create employment, then obviously you hold back a lot of people who would migrate. So policy making becomes easier once you are able to see all this. And these then invest in home countries and typically visit Morocco as tourists. In 2018, Moroccans abroad sent home remittance for 6% of the national GDP. Migrants always usually retain close ties with Morocco and help in less direct ways to forget trade. Again, this is the common thread that we are seeing in all diasporic movements, whether it's Asia, and within Asia and in individual countries, how the diaspora, affects or helps the home country has changed considerably. So again, this is also a common thread. Initially, they were blue-collar workers who helped Europe rebuild. Today, they are highly educated young professionals. Again, the global south needs to work out strategies and policies to retain these highly educated young professionals who are moving to the global north and creating assets out there to the detriment of the south. The south north disparity is because of that. Let's look at the Tunisian diaspora. In fact, if you remember, Tunisia was the first country to the start of the Arab Spring. From Tunisia, which started in 2011, it spread to other countries. Syria is still in a civil war after that movement. The immigration of young Tunisians skyrocketed in early 2000 when the Arab Spring started in Tunisia. Tunisia's security apparatus and border controls fell apart. Civil war in neighboring Libya prompted several 100,000 Asian, Arabs, and sub-Saharan African as well Libyan families to cross into eastern Tunisia. The whole north came into tumult. The whole Arab world came into tumult and led to a lot of forced migration. If you read, there was this major flash floods in Libya today in one of the regions. A lot of people lost their lives. Libya is still in tumult. Now, there was this interesting thing. The African or the Arab state as a complex, powerful actor, not just a passive implementer of European policy demands, how migration policy constitute an asset for authoritarian regimes in the European neighbor to consolidate their power. In fact, migration policies can also be used by authoritarian regime to consolidate their power, to be able to, for example, to be able to stop migrants from coming inside or prevent immigration is a way to exercise power. I'm sorry, we will have to go through this. I think I'll try with my other laptop again next time.
So can I try sharing, because now I can open it?
Now you can. We are anyway 10 minutes away. Forget it. I'll do it.
Okay.
We will have a little. And also, there is a very interesting thing which they talk about. This was some research that I picked up, was the fact that civil society actors can both resist and reinforce Europe. So inevitably, while resisting or by objecting, you could actually reinforce some other country's externalization goals through actions on the ground. So that's how politics moves about. So there was this research on Tunisia particularly, which dissected the roles of civil society actors, showcasing they can both resist and reinforce European external. For example, when Britain is talking about a policy on migrants and talking about taking these migrants and flying them to Rwanda, one might kind of argue what a strange policy it is for a country which colonized the whole world. However, this is politics playing out, identity politics, which is playing out. And interestingly, the lady who is the home secretary or whatever is also an immigrant. So how this politics plays out becomes a very academic, issue to discuss and dissect. In Tunisia, immigration and emigration were intrinsically tied to the revolutionary movement, and freedom of mobility was the core request of the revolution. So the whole 2011 revolution was based on certain parameters. the parameters was corruption was one of the core issues. There was an authoritative regime at that time, and freedom of mobility was the core request. Unfortunately, in spite of the finishing of that monarchy, the policy attempts at liberalizing policy remains unsuccessful. So still the immigration policy is not liberalized a decade after the revolution. This is one of the research that was fine. So a lot of times, even though changes happen, unless the politics allow different changes, you might find that in spite of regime changes, things remain the same. So this is came out of this research by this particular groups. Migration politics through the 2011 revisiting the democratization migrant right nexus. This is there as a research paper in Taylor and Francis, Third World, available on Google. In fact, I have the downloaded copy. You can also, some of these papers are easily available, can be read across as to why it happened, why not. Let's look at the Egyptian diaspora. So Egypt, the phenomena of diaspora was rare until Gamal Abdel Nasser came to power after overthrowing the monarchy in 1952. So much so that Cleland in 1936 had declared Egyptians do not immigrate. Egyptians remain in Egypt. Under Nasser, thousands of Egyptian professionals were dispatched across Africa and North America under Egypt's. Now, what Nasser did was he used people and dispatched them across Africa and North America under Egypt's secondment policy aimed to support host countries' development, but also support the Egyptian regime's foreign policy aims. He used this as a foreign policy, bulwark for Egypt. Egypt also experienced an outflow, and this was the same time Egyptian Jews went out, because remember the Israeli state was being formed, and a large number of Egyptian co-ops. Co-ops are also Christians. So there are various kinds of Christians. Again, as I said, no religion is holistic. There are various sects to it. There are further identity breakups to it. So all these Egyptians moved out. But after Nasser's death, Egyptian liberalized its immigration policy, which led to millions of Egyptians pursuing employment opportunities abroad. During Nasser times, it was purposefully people were sent abroad to do this work, but after that, they were allowed to pursue employment opportunities across Arab worlds. In fact, in 80s, many emigrated to Iraq and Kuwait mainly for economic reasons. Remember, Iraq and Kuwait are in the same circuit. Sizable Egyptian diaspora did not begin to form well into the 1980s. And in fact, when the Arab Spring in Egypt happened in 2011, the diaspora communities across the world mobilized extensively in contempt of the Egyptian revolution. Remember, Egypt had also went through all the tumult. Hosni Mubarak, which was an autocrat leading Egypt, was disposed. But today, again, the army is ruling Egypt. So there was a democratic elections in between. Subsequently, the president was deposed, and army has again taken power. So again, Egypt is another case where things changed and remained the same. Hang on. Okay, where is it? Share. At the end of 2016, CAPMA stated that there are about 9.47 million Egyptian expats. 6.23 in the Arab world, 1.58 in Americas, 1.24 in Europe. 4.7 million Egyptians abroad contribute actively. Again, this is a common thread across, various case studies that we have seen, whether it's Asia, whether it's Africa. When we come to Europe, we'll see how that changes. Now, the interesting part is Egyptians in neighboring countries face additional challenges as abuse and exploitation. Now, understand Libya and Egypt are both Arab world. And yet you will see that there are abuses which are happening to the Egyptian workers. In Persian Gulf, Iraq, Libya have been reported by Egyptian human rights organization, object to what they call Saudization of their culture due to South Arabian petrodollar flush investment in the Egyptian entertainment. So if you see how politics plays out then with identities. So now Saudi Arabia is also Arab, Egyptian is also Arab. On a larger scale, in terms of religion, Islam is the followed religion, and yet there is this between Saudi Arabia and Egypt, there is this politics which gets played out. Twice, Libya was on the brink of war with Egypt due to mistreatment of Egyptian workers. And after the signing of the peace treaty with Israel, this was the time when the president Anwar Sadat was assassinated in Egypt. In fact, when Anwar Sadat, or the Egyptian president, signed a peace treaty with Israel at Camp David, Sadat was assassinated in a military parade was happening, and there was this Egypt was on a brink of a war. In fact, when the Gulf War ended, Egyptian workers in Iraq were subject to harsh measurement, expulsion by the Iraqi government, violent attacks by Iraqis. So you see, within the region, even in the global south, there are all these tensions which work. Egypt's migration and diaspora politics and an emerging transit country. There is this Migration Policy Institute. They had this paper, associate professor in Middle East politics at the Universities of Birmingham. So I picked this up. Egypt is Arab world's most populous country, population of 97 million, largest regional providers of migrant labor to Middle East. Long-standing traditions of using immigration as a soft power tool, right from 52, has become a destination for thousands of Arabs and African immigrants and a major host to hundreds and thousands of Palestinian Sudanese since 2011 Syrian. Remember, Syria is also in a civil war. And that does not seem to end since 2011. So that's what with Egypt. Let's sum up. In the present day, North African countries are countries of origin, transit, and destination for citizens on sub-Saharan African countries. And now we have the sub-Saharan African countries which are worst off in various socio-economic parameters. So more often than not, these sub-Saharan people from these sub-Saharan countries come across to North African countries and then emigrate to Europe, because everybody is trying to look at a better life. For example, Sudan, which is again, there is a conflict which is going on. People would like to go for a better life. In all the regions of the country, migration and security policy is driven by a dynamic combination of various migration patterns, domestic economic demands, foreign policy pressures, changing strategic context, and historical legacies and relationship that remains. So if Algeria has a relationship with France because it had colonized, there remains that relationship. For example, India and Britain, there remains a relationship, considering now that an Indian origin person is the British Prime Minister. A very unheard of thing some time back. The number of young people from North Africa seeking to make their way to Europe in ways that are deemed unusual has increased over the last few years. Unusual is the fact, illegal immigration. Okay. I came across these two books, The African Diaspora, Slavery, Modernity, and Globalization. And from a gender point of view, Women in Africa and the African Diaspora, a reader. So I haven't read those books, but I came across these books. I said, let me share it in case any one of you get across. And then there, your unit gives some other references. There is this two books. Okay. There is this two books, Human Development in Middle East and North Africa, MENA, and Entanglements of the Maghreb, Cultural and Political Aspects, edited by these people. Okay. Let me stop sharing. Any questions? Why is my camera doing this crazy stuff? Okay. It's also crazy in this. Yeah, any questions, guys? I'm sorry, I'm trying to use a different laptop because my other laptop had an audio problem. And in this, the camera is kind of crazy. I think I'll switch back to my original laptop. Any questions, guys? Yeah. Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. Any questions? I hope I didn't go too fast. I try and touch a lot of bases simultaneously to get multiple perspectives. And in fact, when you if you have received your course material and if you've seen the unit, I have done something more than the unit because I thought the unit was not comprehensive enough in terms of touching case studies. So all these Egyptian, Tunisian, and Moroccan diaspora that I picked up is not a part of the unit. But this allows you to get the larger context of North African diaspora in terms of, because the block is called Global Diaspora Case Studies. And unfortunately, there were no case studies in this particular unit on North Africa. So possibly because the unit writer, whoever was the unit writer, picked up Maghreb in the earlier West Asian diaspora, possibly this unit writers, because there are different unit writers and most of the unit writers may not be talking to each other. This may not come in, but nevertheless, I picked it up and I, brought it out in front of you.
Sir, I had a very basic question.
Yeah, Shreya.
So how can a country use immigration as a soft power tool to advance its foreign goals?
How can a country?
How does a country use immigration as a soft power tool?
So look at the fact, assuming the fact, let's take an example of China. China is able, Chinese students en masse go to US universities to study various subjects, including STEM, science, technology, engineering, management. Now, every time a cultural component is placed in another culture, that cultural component has an ability to influence the other culture. So, for example, when Chinese or let's say Indian Indian Bollywood is such, or Indian yoga is such a soft power. So let's assume the fact that India as a policy trains yoga teachers and sends them across the world. Now, inevitably, the Indian culture is being used as a soft power to influence various people. Similarly, Egypt got their people into teaching in various, Arab countries and other places in the world. Now, these people, once they settle in a host country, they bring out the cultural component, they interact with people. And we have seen, for example, look at the Jews, how they are able to lobby their causes in Europe and Americas. The diaspora becomes a very strong lobby. Shilagna?
Yes, sir. Yes, I understand.
In fact, today, from history immemorial, the soft power was always better than the hard power, because remember, if it's like the parents trying to teach a child. There are two ways to teach a child. One is to negotiate and get the child to understand, and B is to beat the child to make him or her understand. Beating always has a negative connotation because it can have a reactionary movement, whereas the soft part is always much easier, because you are because there's going to be no reaction, and then you are able to push your culture or your point of view across.
Yes, right. Makes sense. Yes.
Sri Lanka?
Yes. And
Okay.
also the soft power is much more subtle in than the hard power.
Obviously, it is much more subtle, it is much more long lasting, and you can do much more. See, remember, during colonization also, besides the hard power which the colonizers used in terms of force, there was a large amount of soft power. For example, let's say introduction of English in the country, in the colonies. It's more like changing the culture. See, inevitably, desired results always come out of changing cultures.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right.
on a longer term, it becomes much more, and that is why all countries try and use their soft powers.
Much more effective. Yeah.
India is using its diaspora in US, UK, etc. to take care of its foreign issues. Yes, Kangat is writing that to everyone. All countries use that. All countries today have understood the role of diasporas in foreign policy issues. And now with this global connectivity using internet and a faster means of transportation, why would you not do that? Because inevitably diasporas have always a homeland connection. There is this longing for a homeland. There's a homeland connection. As I said, American Indians are more Indians than what India would be. India has moved. American Indians might be stuck in their 60s and the 70s. So all countries use soft power. All countries use diasporas for foreign policy to influence the host country and so on and so forth. Shilagna?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Got it.
Okay.
So, I had one thing in mind.
Yeah, Shreya.
I was once, though my query is somewhat different from the topic itself, from diaspora.
Not to worry.
So the Arab Spring was something that was it spread it from the North African countries to as far as Middle East as well.
Started from Tunisia.
Yeah, and then to certain Middle Eastern countries also. I mean, the impact was felt like across
Correct.
the
Arab world.
In my reading, I came across this work where I came to this understanding that many perhaps there was also this the cause of the revolution to some extent was also as we were talking of this also, the immigration policies and how people in Middle East, I'm specifically I think thinking of Middle East because it's Middle East where people are coming from all cultures, from all kinds of places, and they are working over there, and they are living as basically foreign nationals. They don't get their citizenship.
Correct.
And then these people are like populating these Middle Eastern countries, which is in turn leading to unemployment and a lot of dissatisfaction amongst the local population over there, which in turn fueled their anger towards the authoritative regimes, which were kind of, controlling these local population by the immigrants, through the immigrants, by giving them more power over the local population itself, and using the armies, like using their own foreign armies in a way, because they were recruiting people from different nationalities, particularly. So that this was kind of this was what I came across in one of my readings.
See, definitely, obviously, authoritarianism, force can only have a limitation in today's world. You can only put force for a limited amount of time. That's number one. But more than that, when you try and control people using force, more often than not, the anger remains within. You are not, see, the role of democracy and politics is also a catharsis kind of a thing, where the individuals are able to feel a sense of belonging. And for example, media is a catharsis. A lot of anger might come out as a Facebook post or as a media article, or in terms of politics. Now, these are all catharsis for communities. Now, when you subdue a community using an autocratic regime, more often than not, you will never get to know what is building inside. And when the pressure is released for whatever reason, for example, in Tunisia, it was the case of a boy immolating himself because he was unjustly, he had to give a bribe or something, and he went in front of the municipal office in that particular town and immolated himself.
Yes,
Now,
sir, it was a vegetable seller.
correct.
Or someone.
Now also understand, one incident cannot lead to a whole revolution. Obviously, there were pressure building up. Nobody could gather it because the media was muzzled. There was no politics happening. Democracies have a role. The politics has a role in terms of taking people's anger. Or it's a catharsis. And if you do not give these vents out, then obviously pressure builds up, leading to a revolution. So, remember also the story of human history is also a history of movement and migration, freedom of movement. If you do not allow what happened during COVID, when when the country or the government wanted to impose a lockdown without understanding that people needed to move. They needed to go back. How will they eat? And look at the explosion which happened when everybody decided to walk back. So inevitably, that is why it is very important that is why a vibrant media also is able to give, various aspects of what is happening in the society, then a certain amount of freedom of movement, a certain amount of freedom of politics. Otherwise, pressure builds up in a society. Shrestha?
Yes, sir. That also brings me to this conclusion that how interconnected all of these
Absolutely.
things are.
Nothing is a deterministic. Every time you read or see or hear that something is explained in a deterministic way, it never is. Nothing is deterministic in life, neither in an individual's lives or in a nation's life. There are multiple factors at play. In media, it is easily a reductionist method to explain. Even academics sometimes does a very reductionist method. So, for example, when Vinay Safran came up with his 6 points on diaspora, it was reductionist based on the Jews model. Then other scholars said, but This is also, so for example, today, when a Bihar person is migrating to Kerala, isn't that a diaspora? Because the Bihari culture and the Keralite culture is totally different. And when that Bihari migrant will come to Kerala, he will have a longing for homeland. He will carry things, his culture to Kerala. Kerala's culture is different. He'll influence the Kerala culture out there. His home culture in Bihar would get influenced. It's a full-fledged diaspora. Why are we calling it a migration? And then they go and settle out there. Shrestha?
Sir, but we cannot still, I mean, when we are looking at the Indian diaspora in the context, I mean, African locations are like marked as nation territories. Like
Correct,
they are
correct,
like, we
correct,
have
correct.
to look at it from that, like,
Correct. So
differentiated.
still we look at diaspora. Our classical definitions of diaspora is in terms of nation states. But in India, for example, each state is a nation state if you look at the number of population and the area.
Yes, so that's, I think, the dilemma of doing it.
So again, you remember, academic pursuit also is based on how you define things. And over a period of time, these definitions change. So there is not watertight things as things happen. As I said, I was reading this article in which they said that now we should be, scholars are defining technical diaspora. Technical diasporas are technical people, professional people who are moving about for their jobs. And they are corresponding with each other in the sense of a diasporic community. UAE is inducting young professionals from UAE where migrants were employed earlier. Ganga, that fight between citizens and getting migrants or nation states and globalization is going to continue. It's going to be a long fight. Each state will try and protect the local polity. There will be local politics. People will there will be a look at migrants from a security lens, and this negotiation will continue. Shrestha?
Yes, sir. I got it.
Okay. So let's close it out here. Next time we'll do the West African diaspora. We have the West African and the East African diaspora, after which we move to Europe. Next Saturday, again at 3 o'clock, Firoz will help us to set up the call because Sada sir is traveling. So we'll meet at 3 o'clock and take this forward. All of you have a nice weekend and catch you next time.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye then.